So, let's go. Number 1. The Silurian hypothesis. Here's a question that sounds like a late-night dorm room after too much coffee. What if we aren't the first ones? Not the first people. The first civilization. The first species on this planet to build cities, burn fuel, wire the sky with machines, and then vanish so completely that the Earth forgot it ever happened. You've heard some version of this before, and your brain probably filed it under nonsense. Ancient aliens. Lost continents. The kind of a thing narrated by a man with very confident hair. So here's the part that should make the back of your neck go cold. In 2018, 2 actual scientists asked exactly this question in an actual peer-reviewed journal, and they could not rule it out. One of them is Gavin Schmidt. He runs NASA's Climate Modeling Institute. This is a man who spends his life reconstructing the temperature of the planet across millions of years. The other is Adam Frank, an astrophysicist who thinks about alien civilizations for a living. Together they wrote a paper with a title that reads like a dare. Would it be possible to detect an industrial civilization in the geological record? They called it the Silurian hypothesis. The name is a joke, sort of. It comes from an old Doctor Who monster, a race of intelligent reptiles who ran the Earth before humans showed up. And the two of them are very clear right up front that they don't actually think a lost civilization existed. They say so in plain language. They strongly doubt it. But that's not the point. The point is the question underneath the question. Because when they sat down to work out what evidence a previous civilization would have left behind, they found something they weren't expecting. They found that the answer might be nothing. Nothing at all. That a whole industrial world could have risen and fallen on this planet, and the rock would keep almost none of it. And it gets worse, because the window is enormous. You need buried fuel to run an industry, coal, oil, the compressed leftovers of ancient forests and oceans. And the Earth has had that lying around since roughly 350 million years ago. That's more than 300 million years of runway. 300 million years in which, in principle, something could have dug it up, burned it, lit up its own little age of machines, and then disappeared under the weight of time. You want to believe you'd know. You want to believe that if there had been another us, we'd have found the bones by now. A skull, a road, a rusted something in a museum drawer. Stay with me. Because the reason you wouldn't know is not a mystery. It's not a cover-up. It's geology. And once you understand how the planet handles its own past, the silence stops feeling like proof that nobody was here. It starts feeling like exactly what you'd expect. Number 2, the planet eats its own surface. Look out a window. Any window. Ground, buildings, a street, a hill in the distance. It feels permanent. It feels old. Like it's always been there and always will be. Almost none of it is old. Not in the way that matters here. The Earth is not a museum, it's a machine that recycles itself, and it never stops running. The floor of every ocean on this planet is being manufactured right now, along cracks in the deep sea, where fresh rock oozes up and pushes outward. And on the other side of that conveyor belt, the old floor slides back down into the planet, into trenches that drag it under and melt it back into the mantle. Here's the number that should unsettle you. There is almost no ocean floor anywhere on Earth older than 200 million years. That's it. Everything before that has been swallowed, eaten, erased, and remade. There's one weird scrap in the Mediterranean that might be 340 million years old, and scientists get excited about it precisely because it's a freak survivor. A single stubborn patch that the machine somehow missed. Think about what that actually means. If a civilization lived by the sea 300 million years ago, the sea it lived by is gone. Not dried up, not buried, gone. The very ground it stood on has been pulled down into the hot dark under your feet and turned back into raw rock. And the land isn't safe either. The continents last longer, sure. But their surfaces don't. Rain takes them apart. Rivers carry them to the ocean. Grain by grain. Wind sands them down. Ice grinds them flat. Whole mountain ranges get worn to stumps and then buried under the mountains that come after them. The face of a continent is constantly being scrubbed clean and repainted. So the older something is, the less of its world is left to hold it. Go back far enough, and you're not looking for a needle in a haystack. You're looking for a needle in a haystack that was set on fire, plowed under, and rebuilt from scratch a dozen times. And this is the thing that flips the whole question around. When you don't find evidence of an ancient civilization, your gut says, see, there wasn't one. But that logic only works if the Earth keeps a good record. And the Earth is a terrible record keeper. It's a shredder that runs for 4.5 billion years without a break. Which raises an even more uncomfortable thought. If direct evidence, the bones, the buildings, the machines, gets destroyed this thoroughly, then maybe we've been searching for the wrong thing this whole time. Maybe the traces that survive aren't objects at all. Number 3. The spike in the rock. There's a moment buried in the Earth's history that scientists have studied for decades. It has a boring name. The Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum. Nobody outside a geology department says that out loud twice, so let's just call it the spike. 56 million years ago, something dumped a staggering amount of carbon into the air and the oceans, and it happened fast. Geologically, it's a blink. In a span that might have been just a few thousand years, over 2 trillion tons of carbon flooded the system. The planet heated up by 5 to 7 degrees. The oceans turned acidic, deep-sea creatures died off in waves. Life on land scrambled, migrated, transformed. Now here's why this particular moment matters to two scientists asking whether a lost civilization could hide in the rocks. It looks familiar, because that, a sudden, sharp, planet-wide flood of carbon that cooks the atmosphere and sours the sea, is almost exactly what we are doing right now. Burning fossil fuels leaves a very specific chemical fingerprint, a certain kind of carbon, a certain kind of warming, a certain kind of damage to the ocean. And when Schmidt and Frank went looking for what an industrial civilization's signature would look like millions of years later, this spike is the closest thing the record has to offer. In the entire last 66 million years, it is the best natural rehearsal we have for what humans are doing to the planet. So, does that mean the spike was them? A lost civilization burning its own fossil fuels 56 million years ago? No. And this is where you have to be honest, because the honest version is more interesting than the creepy one. The mainstream explanation is volcanoes, a massive burst of volcanic activity as the Atlantic Ocean was tearing open, cooking through buried carbon and belching it into the sky. That fits the evidence well. And there's a detail that actually argues against the civilization idea. The ancient spike unfolded over thousands of years. Ours is unfolding over a couple of centuries. We're faster, sharper, more violent in our own quiet way. But sit with what this really tells you. The kind of mark a lost industrial age would leave in the rock is not science fiction. It's real. It exists. We can point to a layer in the ground and say, that is what a carbon catastrophe looks like 56 million years later. It's just a smudge, a chemical bruise in the stone. Which means, if you want to find the ghost of a civilization, you don't dig for statues, you test the chemistry. Number 4, you've been looking for the wrong thing. Close your eyes and picture the evidence of a lost civilization. Go on. What do you see? You see ruins, a broken column half buried in sand, a crumbling wall, a skull with a strange shape, something you could hold in your hand and put behind glass. Forget all of it. None of that survives the kind of time we're talking about. 66 million years. 100 million years. On that scale, a city is a sandcastle at high tide. It's already gone. What survives isn't stuff. It's chemistry. It's the invisible mess a civilization smears through the planet's chemistry just by existing. And once you know what to look for, the list is genuinely disturbing. Start with plastic. You make plastic, and you make a lot of it. And plastic does not want to rot. Push it into the seabed, bury it under millions of years of sediment, and it can leave behind traces, strange carbon compounds that nature doesn't make on its own. A whisper in the rock that says something here was manufacturing. Then there's nitrogen. To feed billions of people, you have to pull nitrogen out of the air and force it into fertilizer on an industrial scale. And when you do that, you tilt the balance of nitrogen in the soil and the sea in a way that leaves a measurable signature. Here's the part that gets me. We can already detect our own nitrogen fingerprint in modern sediments. We are already writing ourselves into the rock right now, whether we mean to or not. And then there's the worst one, the one that would be almost impossible to explain away. Certain radioactive elements simply do not occur naturally on Earth. There's one called plutonium-244. If you find it, there are only two ways it could be there. It came from an exploding star scattered across space and rained down over billions of years. Or somebody made it. And it hangs around. Its half-life is around 80 million years, which means a heavy enough dose from, say, a nuclear war could still be glowing faintly in the sediment tens of millions of years later. Imagine that. Imagine being the scientist who cracks open a layer of ancient stone and finds an element that has no business existing. Not a bone. Not a tool. Just a trace of something that should not be there, whispering across 100 million years that someone once split the atom. That's the real shape of the search. Not archaeology, chemistry. You're not hunting for a civilization's body, you're hunting for its exhaust. And if that sounds far-fetched, the idea of nuclear signatures hiding in ancient rock, the planet has a way of humbling you, because a natural nuclear reactor has already been found, and it's 2 billion years old. Number 5, the reactor that built itself. In 1972, a French physicist named Francis Perrin was looking at uranium from a mine in Gabon in West Africa, and something was wrong with it. Uranium comes with a very reliable recipe. A precise, boringly consistent amount of the special splittable kind, the kind you need for a bomb or a reactor. It's the same everywhere, in the rocks, on the moon, in meteorites. Always the same fraction. Except this sample was short. Some of the good stuff was missing, not a lot. But enough that it should have been impossible. It was as if someone had already used it up. Someone had. Not a person. The planet. The place is called Oklo. And about 2 billion years ago, deep in the ground there, uranium did something that is supposed to require engineers, containment domes, and government oversight. It went nuclear. On its own. Here's how. 2 billion years ago, natural uranium was richer in the splittable kind, around 3%, instead of the sad fraction of a percent you'd find today. Rich enough that if you concentrated it in the right spot and let groundwater seep in, the water could slow the flying particles down just enough to keep a chain reaction going. And that's exactly what happened. Water trickled in, the reaction lit up, the heat boiled the water away, the reaction shut off, the rock cooled, the water trickled back in, and it started again. On and off, over and over, like a heartbeat for hundreds of thousands of years, 16 of these natural reactors switched on in that one patch of ground. They ran at about 100 kilowatts. Enough to power a small neighborhood, humming away underground before there was anything on Earth more complicated than pond scum. And here's the detail that ties it all back. The radioactive garbage those reactors produced, it mostly stayed put. It sat there, locked in the rock, barely moving, for 2 billion years. Which scientists now point to as proof that yes, you can bury nuclear waste and have it stay buried across unimaginable time. But feel the vertigo of what Oklo really means for our question. Nature built a reactor. By accident, with nobody watching. So when a future scientist finds strange nuclear traces in the rock, they can't just shout aliens or lost civilization. They have to ask the harder question first. Did somebody make this, or did the planet do it again, all by itself? The line between natural and artificial is not as clean as you'd like it to be. The Earth can fake a lot of things. Which brings us to the strangest possibility of all. Because so far we've been asking whether people came before us. But people aren't the only thing that ever ruled this planet. Number 6. 150 million years of somebody else. We act like we own this place. Like the Earth was sitting around empty, waiting for something clever to show up, and then we walked in and turned the lights on. The dinosaurs would like a word. They ran this planet for over 150 million years. Try to actually feel that number because your brain will refuse to. Human civilization, cities, writing, agriculture, all of it is a few thousand years old. Industrial civilization, the machines, and the smokestacks is about 300 years old. The dinosaurs held the throne for 150 million. If you shrank the dinosaurs' entire reign down into a single day Everything humans have ever built, every empire, every war, every invention, would flash by in the last 0.03 of a second. A single frame, less than a blink. So here's the thought that Schmidt and Frank's paper quietly opens a door to. Even if it doesn't walk all the way through it. If something ruled the Earth for that long, 500 million times longer than we've had machines, did any of them ever get smart? And it's not a totally crazy thing to ask because one of them was getting interesting. There was a dinosaur called Troodon. Small, fast. And it had a brain that was large for its body, hands that could grab, and eyes that faced forward, giving it real depth perception. The starter kit. The rough ingredients you'd want if you were going to build something clever. Back in 1982, a paleontologist named Dale Russell couldn't let this go. So he ran a thought experiment. What if Troodon hadn't died out? What if it kept going, kept getting smarter, for millions more years? He and an artist actually built a model of where it might have led. They called it the Dinosauroid, a small, upright, big-headed, big-eyed creature with 3 fingers and no tail dragging behind it, standing there, looking back at you. Now, plenty of scientists think Russell got carried away. They say he made it look too much like us, that a smart dinosaur would probably still have looked like a dinosaur, tail and all. And that criticism is fair, and it points at something even eerier. We assume intelligence has to look like a person. 2 legs, big head, clever hands. But there's no law that says so. A mind that rose and fell in the age of dinosaurs might have worn a shape you wouldn't even recognize as a candidate. And here's the trap the whole video has been walking you toward. Even if some creature 100 million years ago got clever enough to light a fire, shape a tool, build a shelter, we would almost certainly never know. Because we already established what happens to evidence over that kind of time. It's not that it's unlikely we'd find their ruins. It's that the record itself is almost completely empty. Number 7. The museum with nothing in it. You grew up with dinosaur skeletons in museums, towering things fully assembled staring down at you in the lobby. And that gives you a quiet, false sense that the past is well documented. That if a creature existed, there's a bone somewhere with its name on it. The truth is almost the exact opposite. The fossil record isn't a library, it's a nearly empty room with a few scattered photographs on the floor, and most of the pictures are torn. Consider what it actually takes to become a fossil. You have to die in exactly the right place, somewhere your body gets buried fast before it rots, before something eats it, before the water and the air and the bacteria take you apart. Then you have to stay undisturbed while minerals slowly seep in and turn you to stone. Then that stone has to survive for millions of years without being crushed, melted, or ground to dust. And then, at the very end, it has to happen to poke up at the surface at the exact moment a human being with a shovel is standing there to notice it. It almost never works. Of all the animals alive today, only around 1 in 10 even have the hard parts, bones, shells, teeth, that stand a decent chance of fossilizing at all. Everything soft just disappears. And when you add it all up, scientists estimate that the fossil record has preserved less than 2% of all the species that have ever lived on Earth. Less than 2%. That means more than 98 species out of every 100 that ever existed left no trace at all. They lived, they filled the world, they died, and the planet kept nothing. No bone, no name, no proof they were ever here. Now drop a civilization into that shredder. Say one existed and lasted 100,000 years. That's 10 times longer than all of recorded human history. Feels huge, right? Against the age of the Earth, it's a single tick. About 1 part in 45,000 of the planet's lifetime. A flicker so brief that even a well-kept record might miss it entirely, and the record is not well kept. This is the part that rearranges something in your head. The silence you've been treating as an answer isn't an answer. When you look back into deep time and see nothing, you have not proven that nothing was there. You've just met the limits of a planet that forgets almost everything. Absence of evidence, here, is not evidence of absence. It's the expected result. So let's stop looking backward for a second. Because there's one civilization on this planet we know for a fact exists, one we can prove. And it's about to teach you the most unsettling lesson of all. It's yours. Number 8, the layer you're making right now. Everything up to now has been a hunt. You've been the detective, sifting the rocks for someone who came before, half hoping to find them, half terrified you might turn around. Because while you were looking for a lost civilization in the deep past, you've been standing inside one. And it's leaving a mark in the rock at this very moment. Right now, today, you are helping to write a layer into the planet that will still be there long after every person you've ever known is dust. Scientists have a word for the things we'll leave behind. Technofossils. And they are not glamorous. Forget the golden monuments. Your civilization's fingerprint is a plastic bag pressed flat into stone, a crushed aluminum can, a ballpoint pen, a thin film of concrete dust spread over half the planet, and chicken bones. This one sounds like a joke until you hear the numbers. At any given moment, there are around 25 billion chickens alive on Earth, more than any other bird, by a landslide, in the entire history of the planet. We have reshaped an animal and bred it in such absurd quantity that the humble chicken bone may become one of the defining fossils of our age. Future geologists could name our entire era after a bird we invented to eat, and then there's the signature that cuts through everything else. In the middle of the last century, we started setting off nuclear bombs in the open air, and for about a decade, we sprinkled a thin dusting of radioactive fallout across the entire globe. Every soil sample, every lake bed, every ice core on Earth carries that sudden spike. It's so sharp, so clean, so unmistakably artificial that scientists have pointed to it as the single clearest line marking the moment humans took over the planet. The exact kind of signal Schmidt and Frank said a civilization would leave. Here's the turn. Everything you've learned in this video about how a civilization disappears and the recycled crust, the carbon smudge, the empty fossil record, none of it is about them. It's about you. We are the lost civilization. We're just early. The only difference between us and the ghost we've been chasing is that we haven't been buried yet. And when we are, our whole enormous, roaring, world-changing age will compress down to what everything compresses down to. A thin line in the rock. A few centimeters of strange chemistry, sharp and bright and wrong. Plastic and soot and a whisper of radiation and the bones of a bird. Most of it will erode away the way almost everything does. What's left will sit in the dark and wait. So the real question was never whether someone came before us. It was whether anyone will come after, and whether they'll be clever enough and lucky enough and standing in exactly the right spot with a shovel to split that stone open, find our thin bright layer, and realize that once on this quiet blue rock, something built a world, and then the world forgot.